Hi, I'm Heidi Hope. Welcome to the She's Gone Free podcast, a show where I share my story as a creative entrepreneur and mother, my journey to a full heart, my often messy ADHD brain, and the stories, hearts, and minds of other incredible women who have healed, found joy, and stepped into their greatness to live a life on fire with purpose. You have found this podcast because you are ready to walk this path too, and I'm so glad that you're here. Okay, so welcome to book club. Our book this month was Into the Magic Shop, Neurosurgeon's Quest to Discover the Mysteries of the Brain and the Secrets of the Heart. And this was written by James Doty, MD. And I loved the book. Did you guys love the book? Yeah, you can just actually, let me open the chat box and give me what you would give it. 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star. I give it a 5. This is like right up my alley because it's the book that I'm writing is like, I'm like taking notes on how he structured this book because I'm doing something similar, which is like trying to combine a memoir or personal stories with also the path of transformation. So I'm kind of doing that with like taking the path of transformation that we do in Unbound in the coaching program and trying to weave that into a novel that also shares personal stories and is a little bit memoirish. So it's a delicate thing to do. Yes, 5 stars from everybody. Yeah. It was a quick read for me. I feel like I read it in 2 days, like once I started. And actually, let me pull up my notes and like questions and stuff that I got ready at the time here. So the first chapter of this book is like draws you right in, right? He did a really good job with that first chapter of like the intensity of him being a brain surgeon, right? And like actually in surgery and illustrating the power of this process in that story was like such a good way, I think, to like bring you right into the book. And then from there on out, it was a really quick read for me. All right, so what I loved about it the most was the blend of science and woo-woo, because I feel like when we talk usually about manifestation, visualization, it like has this reputation for being a little out there, like a little like, I don't know if I'm going to believe that. And what I loved is that he's a doctor and he talks about brain science and his understanding of the brain, and he weaves that in. In fact, he was not even a spiritual guy. He says that a lot. Like, in the beginning of the book, he talks about how he never really believed in God or anything. And then his speech at the very end, which he's giving to the college, he actually like, then he brings in like doing this is like seeing the face of God, right? So that it is completely transformed over his life experiences, his belief in there being something than just our physical reality, right? Renee says, definitely love the crossover between the science and the woo-woo. Yes, totally. I eat that stuff up because I'm like, see, it's true. It's true, seeing the science side, I think, of like, that's why I love quantum physics, because it's sort of where science and spirituality kind of blends together. There is some stuff still that is unexplainable to science, and it's very fascinating to me. Okay, so because of that, this book actually, you can see the people who on the inside cover, like all of the recommendations and all the reviews on there. It's really a mix of people from both like the spiritual realm of the world and the scientific community. So it got kind of praise on both sides, and I think that was really interesting about it too. So the book starts with his childhood in Lancaster, California, which was like a small town at the time. And he's got a pretty rough upbringing. And he frequently leaves his house and like rides his bike to escape from what's happening at home. And he wanders into a magic shop and he meets this woman, Ruth, who then teaches him how to relax his body, clear his mind, respond with compassion for himself and others, and then visualize a future that he wants for himself. And she phrases it as like she's teaching him a magic trick, right? Because he was really into magic at the time. He actually wandered into the shop because he had a fake thumb from his like magic that he lost or whatever. And so he went in to see if he could buy a new fake thumb. And then And then she like goes into teaching him. One of the biggest things that she says in the beginning is that he has to make sure he opens his heart first before he does the magic trick, right? So that's huge, because that's not how he starts off with doing all of this. He really goes after like money, because he grew up in poverty, right? So he wants like the money and the prestige, money and power, essentially. And he is able to draw all those things to him, but ultimately it doesn't bring him happiness. And that's found later in the book when he realizes that he needs to open his heart. But one of the quotes is, you need to open your heart to learn what you want before you use this magic. Otherwise, you don't really know what you want, and you get what you think you want, you're going to end up getting what you don't want. So she's basically saying, you don't, until you bring your heart into the process, you actually don't even know what's best for you, essentially, right? It's like if we're just thinking like just with our head, and we don't bring our heart into it, into the process, then we may end up bringing into our lives things not as that we thought we wanted, but that don't actually make us happy. This is a big thing I related to in this story too, because there were a lot of things, there was a lot of success that I set out to create in my old business, and just I remember like that I told all of you, I think like one of the first things I manifested was when I was like, I want to do $1 million in business this year. And then that happened that year. And I was like, it just doesn't really make me happy the way that it didn't matter. It's whether or not you're enjoying the journey. It's like, once you get the outcome, it's like the outcome is, I don't know, it's all over then. It's like, if I didn't enjoy the process of generating this $1 million, then what's the point of it, right? Because it didn't bring me any joy. The process is what has to bring you joy. So I relate to that quite a bit in this book. So after learning from Ruth, it's not like his life changes overnight, but he just practices on a daily basis, and things do begin to get better. And he's able to like the situation he was born into, right? Control our childhood. So he's born into poverty, and his father is an alcoholic, and his mother is clinically depressed, and I think attempted suicide a few times. She's like in bed all the time. And he has a tough relationship with his father. None of that stuff changed like while he was a child practicing this, but he was able to be in it in a new way. Like he started to change his mindset around it. There was a scene like his parents were fighting, and he was able to bring love into that scenario where normally he would run and hide or whatever. And his parents actually responded to him with love and were like, everything's going to be okay. It's okay. You know? So he does shift how he's able to emotionally handle the turmoil that he's in while he's in it. Then he's independent, and he leaves the house, and he does draw to him opportunities and scholarships, and he gets into programs he shouldn't have gotten into because he really didn't have the grades. And then his dream of becoming a doctor comes true, and he starts making lots of money, and then he gets very successful in the business world. I think by the time he was like in his 40s, he was worth $75 million. This is a real guy. You can go follow him on Instagram too. It's cool. It's a real true story. So by the time he's in his 40s, he gets into like the .com industry. He invests in some like a medical device. He's worth $75 million. But he doesn't have good relationships. He did all of it at the sacrifice of his personal relationships and other people. And then the .com bubble bursts, and he loses everything, loses all his money. And that is a big turning point for him, although there were a few other turning points in the book. But that was really when he decided he needed to go back to like helping people, which was why he got into being a doctor in the first place, was because he did want to help people. So this is when he starts his there was an accounting error, right? He loses all his money. They find out, they call him back, and they're like, actually, you do have a lot of money still. And he decides at that point to give it all to charity, and he starts these foundations. He gets back into practicing medicine because he had gotten into the business world at that point. He goes back to practicing medicine. He starts this foundation. And kind of the big lesson of his life is when he went home after losing all his money, he goes back to Lancaster, and he finds all his notes from him and Ruth, right? And in the notes, he noticed that he underlined, I forgot what I think I wrote it down later, but he underlined two things: compass of the heart, and then what you think you want isn't always what's best. And that's on page 224 and 225 of the book. So once he sees that, he's like, oh, wait a minute, I have been doing this I never really brought my heart into this process. And then once he did, he was able to then move forward. Like the next chapter of his life was really bringing all of that together. So really interesting, because we talk about manifestation a lot in our coaching group, right? And there's three components: clear intention, elevated emotion, and then embodiment, or like inspired action. But it's like taking action in the world. So the clear intention is the thought and the visualization, and like, I want to make the picture really clear of what I want. And he had that part down. Elevated emotion is bringing love and gratitude into the practice, because it really makes it much more powerful. And it is like being grateful for a future that hasn't arrived just yet, but like being in the space of like, I know it's coming to me and I'm already grateful. And then taking action, so he did do the action part too, because he still, went to med school and all of that. But he was just missing that heart piece. Renee said the timing of reading the book was perfect. It really helped open me to the power of manifestation. Yeah, because it's super woo, right? That's why this is such a good pick, because normally when people are talking about manifestation, it's like, people with like the super woo, they've got all the cards in the background and and all the crystals on their neck and all, and so to hear it from a scientific perspective, I think opens our minds to those of us that are maybe more skeptical of it, or like, that's not me. It helps open up our belief. And then once that seed of belief is there, we can practice. And once we practice, we get feedback. And when we get feedback, our belief grows stronger and stronger. And then suddenly it doesn't feel so silly to talk about it. But like, I wouldn't be like, let's all talk about manifestation 5 years ago. But it's because the process has been fun. It's really a fun process. It's a way to play. It's a way to play with our reality, and call really great things into our life that bring us joy. We can begin to just attract those things to us by practicing the clear intention, practicing the elevated emotion. That's a harder one. Practicing the elevated emotion is a harder one. And the author talks about that because he experienced so much heartache as a child. So when you experience all that trauma and heartache and pain, we close our hearts off, right? Because we're afraid that if they're open, that they're vulnerable to being broken again, right? Any heartbreak. And so opening the heart is probably the hardest part for most humans, because we all have whatever it is that hurt us, right? And then we have to learn to open beyond that. I know that's something we've been talking about in our group too. So I want to know from all of you, you can put this in the comments as you think about it, but like, what are some of your greatest takeaways from the book? Were there any phrases or quotes or moments or experiences that he writes about that really impacted you or stood out to you? You can type that into the comments anytime. Karen said, part of manifesting is believing it will happen. Yes. Yep. One quote though that I did write down is, the brain doesn't distinguish between an experience that is intensely imagined and an experience that is real. So this is why, like, it's like believing it's going to happen before it happens is so powerful, because our brain can't distinguish which, you have your hand raised, Karen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was really amazed about how he was able to get into med school and then to get into the program that he wanted to get into. It was sheer just like unwillingness to give up on his dream. So it's not just visualizing it, it's believing it and not letting it go, not saying, okay, maybe it's not meant to happen. Because as you're listening, I listened to the audio, but as I was listening to it, I was like, this guy's got cojones. Like he's in front of like these brilliant people who are telling him he's not it. And he's saying, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just that attitude that is what impressed them and said, actually, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
It's that belief in yourself and that willingness to not stop until you get to what you want is what got him there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it was just very inspiring.
Yeah.
That, you know, you don't have to have all the things. In fact, you can have none of the things with just a belief and you can still do it. That to me was the most inspiring part of it.
Yes, I love that. That is really powerful because he wasn't like the straight A student. He was, you know, and Julie said the same thing. She took away like the metaphor of the magic trick really resonated, and then also his confidence in the outcome. So it's the same thing when he storms in and he's like, "No, you guys are wrong. You've made a mistake. I'm going to be a doctor," you know, and that's awesome. And I think it's really inspiring for anybody to like that level of conviction is very pervasive. And I know a lot of people in our group are business owners too. Okay, so this is like this is confidence and belief in what you're doing, and that confidence and belief in what you're doing attracts people to you. It attracts customers to you. It does breed success. And the lack of confidence or the lack of belief in oneself repels success. Essentially, it's like nobody's going to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. Nobody's going to buy what you're selling if you don't even buy it, right? And so that confidence weaves into whatever area of life you want to bring it into. Same with relationships or whatever. It's sometimes like even with me, my coaching work, it's like I have to believe that healing is possible for everybody. If I'm going to get up, if I'm going to sit here and say you can transform your life, I have to believe that it's possible to transform your life. I have to know it. I have to already see it having happened. And I often say that, like, I already see people on the other side of what their challenge is, and that's really important. We have to have that same level of belief in ourselves and our dreams and what we want to create. And how do we get that? How do we get that conviction and that belief if we're still not sure? We practice it. Practice because you're forming new neural pathways. So that's why stuff like affirmations sounds super woo-woo, but it's not. You're retraining your brain because your brain's running on an old script. Ruth taught him a new script to practice. His old script was just the life he had known. That's what everybody's script starts out being: the life the life you're born into, what your parents tell you, that's the script we all start out with. And however big that is or limiting that is, that's what we begin to pattern our life after until we learn a new script for ourselves, in which we're the creators, in which we have the power and the ability to change our own lives any way that we want it to look. We have the power and the ability to make that happen. Right. Julie, I loved how it was an actual magic shop that he walked into, which is really cute. And he was into magic at the time, but I do love that metaphor of magic because to the outside, it does feel like magic, but there's so much science behind why it works. If you study the brain and everything that's happening, like there's a reason why this all works. And so it's cool. I liked that too. I enjoyed that too. Karen, the image of himself in a white lab coat was a powerful piece of his manifestation. He never forgot it. Yes. Yep. That's right. So he made the vision really clear. In fact, Ruth said to him, imagine that you're looking through foggy glass. And every time you practice this visualization, it's like your defog or your defroster or whatever goes on. And so the more you practice, the clearer and clearer that vision gets, until it becomes so clear, your belief is so strong in it now, and I think that was part of the process of me being here in this house that I'm in right now. The picture became so clear. And there were a lot of times this spring when things almost fell through or like they were stressful. And I was like, this can't fall through. I already see myself there, and it's already really clear. So like the outside world wasn't giving me feedback that matched my vision. I had to hold tight to the vision and know that that was stronger than whatever else was going on in the outside world. Okay. And how did I get that unwavering belief? Because I saw it over and over and over again, because I practiced visualizing over and over and over again. When you see something that many times, you're like, this has to happen. It can't not, right? Okay, so in chapter 1, it's called Real Magic. So this is all about so the introduction is the great scene in which he is operating on a 4-year-old boy, right? And then his assistant hits a vein or something, and he's bleeding out in his brain. And in that moment, he has to clamp the vein. He can't find it. It's obviously very stressful. In that moment, he relaxes his body. He visualizes getting the vein in the pool of blood because he couldn't see it, so he mentally saw it. And then he's able to save the boy's life. And then he talks about the reason why he's able to do that is because of what he learned as a boy, right? So that's how it all opens. It was like actually somebody texted me after they read the introduction. They were like, wow, that was a strong start, because it was like very suspenseful. So chapter 1 goes into his childhood, 1968. He's riding his bike. He enters the magic shop, and he talks with Ruth about magic tricks. And he said, how do you think the magic tricks work? And Ruth says to him, the mind is a funny thing. It sees what it expects to see. It expects to see a real thumb, so that's what it sees. Talking about the fake thumb and the magic trick. So that's on page 21. So right away, she's starting to show him the power of the mind. And I love this because think about it in your own life. If what we expect to see is then what we see, if we can change what we expect to see, we can change what we see, right? And that's part of the power of visualization. So chapter 2, Ruth starts to teach him how to relax his body. So the first step is relaxing your body. This is why I encourage everybody to meditate so much, because it seems to busy people with a lot of things on their to-do list, and you're juggling kids and careers and a million things, meditation kind of feels like a frivolous waste of time, right? When you're a doer and an action taker, sitting still and not taking action feels like I'm wasting time, and time, of course, we always feel like we don't have enough. Right? So, but meditation teaches you to relax your body and your mind, but it teaches you to get into a relaxed state. So practicing meditation daily is really powerful in training your brain. So it takes him 11 days before he's able to actually focus on, because she does like a body scan where you focus on each part of the body. It takes him 11 days. Before he can do that. Then chapter 3 goes into thinking about thinking. So this is the observation of thought. This is another big thing that a lot of spiritual teachers talk about, but it is becoming the observer of your own mind. So you are not your thoughts. You become the observer of your thoughts. So he says in that, now I know that the brain can be trained to improve one's focus and attention, and also to not respond to the ongoing dialogue in our head that distracts us from making clear and useful decisions. Today, this is well understood, but at the time, what Ruth was teaching me was unheard of. That's page 61. So he recognizes now, after all of his scientific training and being a neurosurgeon, that what she was teaching him to observe his thoughts and to be able to improve your focus and your attention is possible for everybody. This is what originally drew me to meditation and this work in the first place, because I was struggling with like ADHD symptoms of like being forgetful, lack of focus, feeling really overwhelmed with like my inability to focus, feeling frazzled or scattered, or feeling like sort of like not there, like kind of like spacing out. That's a good way to say it. So but I learned that you can train your brain no matter what your limitations feel like they may be. You can always train your brain to do better than it is right now. And that's another reason why meditation is so powerful and transformative, even when it feels like you're just sitting there doing nothing. So he found two things that worked for him. Focusing on the flame was one of them. And then the other one was a mantra, essentially. So she said, pick any two words. So he picked the word Chris because it was a girl that he had a crush on, and the word doorknob, knob. So he just said Chris knob over and over and over again. So it doesn't matter what you're saying. The point is that it's like helping to focus your attention. So that's why mantras work so well. It isn't necessarily about what you're saying so much as it is about your ability to focus your attention on one particular thought and let all the other thoughts go. So now he's practicing this stuff, and he starts to note that his attitude about his home life begins shifting, that nothing's changing there, but his attitude about it is starting to change. In chapter 4, there's the scene where he confronts the bully. So I loved this too. So his brother was like frequently bullied, and I don't know if his brother was being bullied or somebody else was, but he went and stood up to the bully. And the bully came up to him and was going to throw him or something. And he just like stared at him right in the eyes. And he said, in that moment, I saw his fear and I saw his pain. And then once we locked eyes, once he realized he had been seen, he was like, I'm getting out of here. Right. And he left. So it's like that powerful to just stare him down and to witness the fear and the pain. But you could see that he was also starting to develop compassion through that, right? That now I'm not just looking at a bully, but like I can actually see past what, like he's got me by the throat, but I can see past what's happening in this moment and see deeper into and have compassion or empathy for him. There's a quote I liked in that chapter too. Research shows the heart to be an organ of intelligence with its own profound influence, not only from our brain, but on our brain, our emotions, our reasoning, and our choices. So this is when Ruth begins to teach him to open his heart and send love and positive thought to other people. So he begins practicing with that. So this is, I think it's about a week before she leaves. And this is when she begins to stress to him that you can manifest anything that you want by visualizing it, but never do it without opening your heart first. Otherwise, you could be mistaken in what you want. So he actually, after the bully situation, runs in, and they were talking about another boy, her grandson, and he thought that they were talking about him. And they start talking about his home life and the difficulty there. And she says to him, when our hearts are wounded, that's when they open. We grow through pain. We grow through difficult situations. That's why you have to embrace each and every difficult thing in your life. I feel sorry for people who have no problems. That's chapter 4, page 90. So she talks about how hard things open your heart. And this is when he begins to understand and have empathy for everyone, even his parents. He begins to even have some empathy for his dad, who, like, up until that point, I feel like he really kind of blamed his dad for everything, even though his mom was also, I was talking about this to somebody. We all kind of do that. Don't you guys have like one parent over another that you blame for everything that's wrong with your life? Like there's always like somebody that you blame more. And for him, it was his father. Where he saw his mom more as a victim, but she also had her own stuff going on that was affecting his childhood too, right? Okay, so chapter 5 goes into like, what do you want now? She starts to teach him about the power of visualization. So she's like, well, what is it that you want? And he didn't even know what he wanted for his life at first. I think so many people don't even ask themselves what they want. Like, other than your career, which you go to college for, maybe, like, then everybody's asking you, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want your career to be? That's like all we think about what we want for our lives when we're designing our lives in our 20s. And then suddenly we're in a life that is only about our job, right? It's like, what's the first thing you ask people? What do you do? You know? But there's so much more to like our joy and happiness and fulfillment than our career necessarily, right? So, of course, he says the first thing he wants is $1 million, of course, coming out of poverty, and he thinks money solves all problems. And so, and he didn't have his basic needs met, right? Sometimes they didn't have food on the table. They kept getting evicted, so they didn't have housing. And so he thinks, you know, when there's money, we're okay. And when there's not money, we're not okay. So that's the first thing he wants. So Ruth said, did you open your heart first before you asked for that? And he was like, yeah, you know. So she said, fine, we'll go with $1 million. So she said, practice looking at the world through your millionaire eyes. I love that. And I say this all the time, whatever you want for your life, imagine that you have it now. Practice now. If you don't practice being, like I say, be her now, but like whatever you envision for yourself, start acting and living as if it has already happened. Because if you don't, it's never going to happen. You have to become her for your outer circumstances to change. Popular in manifestation talk is the law of attraction. And they, in the Abraham Hicks books, they have a money thing where they say like, put $100 in your pocket or $1,000 or whatever you want. And all day, mentally imagine yourself spending the money on whatever you want to buy. I could buy that with my $100. I could buy that with my $100, and practice over and over and over again, spending the money. And that begins to draw wealth to you and abundance to you, because your brain is like repeatedly like, I have so much money, I can buy anything that I want to buy with it, right? So Ruth says, practice looking out at the world through your millionaire eyes. And the next day he returns with a whole list of everything he wants, a Rolex, a fancy car, all that stuff. And Ruth asks again, did you open your heart before you made this list, right? And one of the things on the list though was becoming a doctor. He had a doctor visit his school, and so he didn't want to be a magician anymore. Now he wanted to be a doctor, and he wanted to help kids. So she said, well, let's focus on that one, because she knew that that was the one that actually came from his heart, right? So this is the quote: imagine in your head you're looking through a window. The window is all fogged up. Think of your intention as the defrost setting. Set your intention over and over again so that the window gets clearer and clearer. So clear intention. Get crystal clear on what it is that you want. And if you've never done it before, a lot of people don't do this because they're afraid that they're not going to get it. Like they don't dare to really say what they really want, what's really on their heart, because they're scared of getting it and being heartbroken, right? Well, if I don't put it out there that this is what I want, then I will never, you know. But instead, you're just living your life in heartbreak, because that is a desire of yours that's on your heart. And I always say, like, nothing's put on your heart unless it's meant for you. We all have different dreams. We all have different goals. We all have different visions for our lives. It's not there by accident. It's there on purpose, because it's what's meant for you. All right. So, Doty practices with, he practices this with not getting evicted. So he thinks, okay, well, I guess they were about to get evicted again, like a week later or whatever. And so he just kept visualizing, like, not getting evicted, not getting evicted. We're going to stay in this house. We're going to stay in this house. And then a man comes and knocks on the door, and he's like, oh, this is the guy who's here to throw the family out. And who is it? It was a guy that owed his dad money, and he had the check for his dad. So then they had the money to pay the rent, and they didn't get evicted. So he's really excited, because he's like rushes to the magic shop, and he's like, it worked. We didn't get evicted from the house, right? So these first couple of chapters are just like learning the process, essentially. So he talks about how Ruth taught him the process and how he began practicing it. And throughout the whole time, he backs everything up with science. You know, he says, like, this is what Ruth taught me, and then I practiced it as a kid, and it worked, and and then he says, and this is why it works, because this is what's going on in the brain. So he bridges that gap between like modern neuroscience and ancient, but not really researched scientifically, meditative practices. So he bridges the, under-researched woo-woo with the science. And a lot of the people that I love to follow are doing the same thing. They have some kind of science background and they get pulled into the woo and then figure out why the woo works, right? So he says what makes these practices work is neuroplasticity. We change the way we repetitively think, we start changing our brains. And he's uniquely suited to make this argument, because who's going to argue with a neurosurgeon, right? He knows the brain pretty well. So Ruth says, everything you put on your list, everything you feel in your heart, everything you think and imagine with your mind, if you truly believe, if you work very hard, will happen. You have to see it and then you have to go after it. You can't just wait in your room. You actually have to go get good grades and go to medical school and learn how to be a doctor. But in some mysterious way, you will also be drawing it to you and you will become what you imagine. I love that. I love that. Chapter 5, that's page 121. That's probably one of my favorite quotes in the book. Karen says, I didn't finish to the very end of the book, so I don't know if he gets into this, but I want to know, who is this Ruth person and where did she come from? Where did she learn all this? Side note, when I converted to Judaism, my Hebrew name is Ruth. Oh, I love that. No coincidences. It doesn't go into where Ruth is from. Nope. It doesn't go into where she's from or anything. No, he comes back and he finds his notes and everything, like after his father dies and all of that. And after he loses all his money. But no, I don't know where she's from. She's a magician. Okay, so, but his promise to her, so she made him promise to teach this to other people. So his promise to her does come in at the end, remembering that promise and then what he created out of that. So in chapter 6, he starts to believe he has the power to change his circumstances. Which once you believe, it proves central to his ability to actually do so. You have to believe you can change your circumstances to be able to. The belief needs to be there. And you guys mentioned that, right? That like his conviction and his belief was so strong. It was remarkable, right? It's one of the things that stood out the most to everybody. So, by his senior year, he dreams to be his dream of going to college starts to become like in jeopardy because his grades are really bad. He's like almost failing out of school. And then, he visualizes every single day going to college, and he ends up getting college acceptance and he ends up getting financial aid too. And he accredits that to having learned, quote, to transform the energy contained within each of us to have a profound impact. So he attributes that to changing his energy. And how did he change his energy and his emotion into belief? Through repetitive thought, through the repetitive visualization. Okay, so chapter 7, it goes into like him not doing well in school, but he gives that really passionate speech to the committee who recommends him. The other thing he does is his dad just got out of jail and called him for help and needed money. And he helped his dad. So he sent his dad $1,000, even though he didn't have the money to go into med school. He didn't have enough money for his dream yet because his scholarship didn't come in yet. So this is when he's still in his undergrad, but wants to go to med school. So he sends his dad $1,000. Then his dad gets critically ill. So this is a big notable part of the story. His dad's sick, his dad's dying. So he has to forgive his father at this point, right? And he's sleeping at night and his dad visits him in a dream. Now, this is a guy who just doesn't believe in God or religion at all. So he's like, I don't know what's going on with this. His dad visits him in a dream, or he recalls waking up and seeing his dad like sitting at the foot of his bed. And his dad tells him that he's sorry and that he loves him. And then he gets a phone call later that night that his dad passed away in the hospital. 2 weeks later, he gets his acceptance letter to Tulane, the medical program, and then he ends up getting an Army scholarship. So he ends up being able to afford going into med school. And his dad sent, before his dad died, his dad sent him, I guess his dad got a check. He had said to him, I'm expecting a check. I haven't gotten it yet. And he like was like, I don't believe that, but he sent him the money. His dad actually sent him the money when he got the check too. So that was like a big part, I think, in like the forgiveness of his father and the before he died. Okay, and in opening your, every time you forgive, your heart is opening. You know, if you're closed off in your heart, it's usually some grievance or something that you haven't forgiven yet that's still affecting you. So being able to fully open your heart requires you to forgive everything and everyone. That's a lifelong practice for sure. So he, this is another time now, the neurosurgeon thing. So he was originally going to go into plastic surgery, and then he did some type of I don't know, an internship, or I don't know how med school works, but a rotation in neurosurgery, and he really liked it, and he was pretty good at it because his ability to stay calm. So he decides he wants to be a neurosurgeon, and they say, well, the Army only allows like we only train one neurosurgeon per year in this program, and we already have the guy, and it's not you. And so he goes directly to the chairman of neurosurgery. He tells him it's a big mistake. This is what I want to do. And ultimately he gets his wish because somebody drops out of the program. So another just little magical thing there. But at this point, his practice starts to slip because he gets into like partying with all the people at med school. So he's not practicing his visualization regularly, and he gets into the bad car accident. He has the out of body experience, right? So once he has that experience, I wrote it down, a quote here. This affirmed his belief. It affirmed the absolute belief that who we are today doesn't have to be who we are tomorrow, and that we are connected to everything and everyone. So this is when he starts to get woo. And this is when, nothing like almost dying to renew your faith in God. So this is what brings in that spiritual side of him that he had never really believed in before that point. Julie said, I kept wondering if she was made up because it was so oddly lucky that they were connected. Ruth, yeah, I know. There are no coincidences in life, though. Okay, so chapter 9 is called The Sultan of Nothing. So this is when they talk about, by the year 2000, he's worth 75 million. He loses everything overnight. He uses his life throughout all of this, though, to illustrate how the visualizations worked for him, though, all the way up to like his pinnacle of success. And he says, attention is a powerful thing. It can literally change our brains, creating more gray matter in the very areas that help us learn, perform, and make our dreams come true. But that chapter also illustrates his failure to open his heart and how he eventually lost it all. And of course, the heartbreak, this brings it back to what Ruth said, the losing it all is what ultimately made his heart open up and remember that was a part of the process that he was not bringing into the table. And it's the only way to create lasting happiness. It's like all the physical things didn't give him love or meaningful relationships, right? So then he goes back home in chapter 10 and finds his notes from Ruth, and he had underlined compass of the heart, and what you think you want isn't always what's best for you. Those are underlined. So this is when he finds out he's not actually poor, and he gives all of his money to charity. And then he's committed to helping others, serving the poor. He writes the alphabet of the heart. And he says the alphabet of the heart is compassion, dignity, equanimity, forgiveness, gratitude, humility, integrity, justice, kindness, and love. And he starts to feel like a deep sense of connection to other people, and like really recognizes everybody's shared humanity. He says, everywhere I went, I saw people who were just like me. Each of them was walking a different path. Each of them struggled and suffered at times. That's on page 249. I love that too, because that's like so related to the work that we do. I love that. Chapter 12, manifesting compassion. This is when he talks about the opera singer, June, one of his patients, and he really connected with her. And before that point, he never wanted to connect with his patient. Patients had to be like they teach you in medical school, like you're not supposed to get attached to a patient. A patient you have to like take that out to remain calm under the pressure, right? Because then when you're invested in somebody and you love them, and then you're like, when it becomes personal, it's harder to remain calm under the pressure. So this is when he starts Project Compassion. So he needs to like, now he's feeling all the feelings, but he's feeling all the feelings when he should be remaining calm. So he starts this foundation for compassion, Project Compassion, right? And this is when he meets the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama makes a huge donation to the foundation. And he says that organization was one of the ways, and also writing the book was the way that he kept his promise to Ruth, right? That he would then someday, she said, someday you need to teach this to somebody else. And this foundation is also like researches the scientific side, because these practices didn't have a scientific backing, right? That was what he always felt was lacking. So that's why it was magic, quote unquote magic. But he was the guy that was like, I'm going to do the scientific research. And so they started researching the heart and the brain and compassion and giving, the effect of giving and how it lights up different reward centers in the brain and all of that. So in chapter 13, the final chapter, he gets asked to speak at Tulane. And that's the university he first went to that he was like almost failed out of. Before he went into med school. And he thought it was really funny that they chose somebody who almost failed out to give the speech to the graduates. So this is when he first like puts his whole story on paper, and he tells it during that speech. And he brought everybody to tears and everything. So he said, this is another quote that I really liked. This path will take you to life's deepest and darkest valleys, but it will also take you to life's highest peaks, where you will see the meek demonstrate strength you thought not possible, cures for which you can find no explanation, and the power of compassion and kindness to cure human ills. And by doing so, you will see the very face of God. Oh, I loved that one. That's on page 273. So good. So now he's really brought God into it. So he's like, for this guy that, never believed. And I do think that like a lot of people who grow up in difficult circumstances like that have a real hard time, have a real skepticism around faith. Because if you've gone through something hard, you're like, well, what kind of a God would allow bad things like that to happen, right? So I think a lot of children coming from those backgrounds don't have strong faith. But he, through his life circumstances and experiences, he developed that over time. He then, in this chapter, he starts talking about the effect of giving on the brain, how it lights up pleasure and reward center. He also talks about the limits of science here. So he talks about the limits of science when trying to explain the miraculous, essentially. That there's a place that we haven't figured out what's happening yet. That's inexplicable, right? And he notes he says there's no part of the brain that I can slice into and watch love spill out. Like, we know there's so many parts of the brain that control different things, but there's no part of the brain that can control love, love. When you feel love, it might activate different areas of the brain, but the brain isn't the source of it though, right? The source of it is our heart center as an energy center, right? But the source of it is our source. The source of it is who we are. Well, that is us. We are the love, our conscious. We are just a conscious embodiment of it, having a human experience, right? So I loved it. I loved the overarching theme the whole time, that like you can change your life through meditation and visualization. Look at his circumstances. He had nothing. For him to achieve what he achieved in life from where he came from, not probable at all. So whatever circumstances you find yourself in right now, or whatever circumstances you were born into and grew up with, cannot limit you. Whatever you want, whatever's on your heart is possible for you. And it all starts with just daily practice, mindfulness, visualization, practicing feeling elevated emotions, practicing gratitude. So many successful people have a gratitude practice. Do you think it's coincidental? No, they're always appreciating and grateful for everything. And that appreciation, gratitude is the foundation of manifestation. It is because gratitude means it's already happened, right? So even if you can't wrap your head around the big dream, like it's too scary to dream the big dream, so maybe I'm not ready to believe that's possible for me yet, just start appreciating everything you have now. Just get yourself into appreciation however you can. And then you can start visualizing whatever it is that you want because you've opened your heart. So open that heart first and then visualize what it is you want. And then you begin taking action in the world with the belief that this is the path you're on. This is what's going to happen. It's on its way to you. So now I can start acting in the world as if it's already on its way to me, right? So I'm in the process. One of my goals is to finish writing my book and get a publishing deal. So I'm just going to start acting as if that's already happened, so I visualize it. I'm excited about it. I feel elevated emotion. I'm going to continue I'm writing every day as if I have a publishing deal, even though I don't yet. But I'm going to act as if every single day I'm going to take inspired action out in the world as if it's already happened. And with the belief and expectation, the expectation that it is on its way to me. But I could sit around and wait till I got the deal before I become an author. I got to become the author first, right? So that's just a little personal example. Karen, the source is our souls. Yeah, exactly. All right. So any last reflections or questions? Any questions about the book that you guys want to pop into the chat? Would you recommend it to others? I would. Yes. I would, and I did. If you are watching this and you haven't read the book yet, go read the book. It's a really short, quick read. It's inspiring. It will get you into elevated emotion. It will maybe re-inspire your meditation and visualization practice. So if you don't believe me, you can believe this guy. He's got a degree. He's a doctor. I'm not. So I can be the woo person and you can trust the science in the book there. Yes, I still want to know about Ruth. So I've started following him on Instagram because I tagged him in our book club post. So I think I'll go on and DM him and be like, we want to know more about Ruth. I don't think he ever found Ruth again though. So I feel like because he met her as a boy and didn't know where she came from or whatever. I think he did try to track her down. I don't think he ever found her though, but yeah, we want to know more about Ruth. Okay. Yeah. We want to have Ruth on the show. Let's get Ruth into our club, into our group. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. We are headed to the pool to meet some new friends before school starts for the kids in 2 weeks. Thank you guys. Great conversation today. Oh, he did, Jamie. He said she died of breast cancer in 1979, he said. How did he end up finding her though? I don't remember that. Was it her son that he ended up finding? I don't even remember that part. He found the shop and it had a new owner. Okay. He found the shop that had a new owner. Oh, well. Ruth can't be on the show. It's okay. Ruth is guiding from above now. Just her energy changed. That's all. I want Ruth to still be here. So I blacked it out. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day, everybody. See you soon.
If you liked today's episode, subscribe to the channel and share it to inspire somebody else today. You can rate and review the podcast so it reaches more ears. And of course, I always love your comments. Follow me on your favorite social media platform at Heidi Hope, Photographer Rising, and She's Gone Free, or visit HeidiHope.com to get on my insider list and hear about upcoming coaching and online learning opportunities. Thanks for listening. I'm so grateful for you.